Number 1. The secret tunnel beneath the tomb of Seti I. In October of 1817, an Italian strongman turned explorer named Giovanni Belzoni broke into a sealed doorway in the Valley of the Kings. What he found was the longest and most beautiful tomb ever cut for a pharaoh. It ran roughly 137 meters into the rock, its walls covered in painted stars and gods. This was the tomb of Seti I, a ruler of the 19th dynasty who reigned around 1300 BC. But the discovery that would haunt the site was not the paintings. It was a hole in the floor. Below the burial chamber, a steep passage dropped away into the bedrock, heading down toward nothing anyone could see. Belzoni dug a few meters into it and stopped. He was certain it led to a hidden treasure. Local people believed it led to a secret exit, or to the underworld itself. For nearly 2 centuries, no one knew where it went. In the 1960s, a local man named Sheikh Ali Abdel Rasul spent years and much of his own money tunneling into it, reaching about 30 meters before the passage became too dangerous to continue. A full clearance was finally carried out between 2007 and 2010, led by the Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass. His team followed the tunnel roughly 174 meters into the mountain, descending about 91 meters straight down. That is deeper than a 20-story building driven into solid stone. Along the way, they found unfinished steps, guidelines painted by ancient workmen, and even a scribbled instruction to move a doorway to the left. And then the tunnel simply stopped. No chamber, no second burial, no treasure. It ended, unfinished, in raw rock. One theory holds it was symbolic, an attempt to reach the primeval waters believed to lie beneath the earth. Another says it was a genuine try at a deeper, safer burial chamber, abandoned when the king died. A few insist it points to a sealed room still waiting below, though the excavators found no sign of one. Today, the tunnel is closed. The floor is steep and littered with loose debris, and the tomb's paintings are crumbling from humidity and salt. Here, the danger is not a curse. It is the rock itself. And the next site does not hide underground at all. It hangs off a cliff. Number 2. The Sarcophagi of Karajía. High in the cloud forests of northern Peru, near the town of Luya, a row of tall figures stares out from a ledge on a sheer cliff. They stand about 2 to 2.5 meters tall, shaped like standing human bodies, with long jaws and faces painted in red and white. Some of them wear real human skulls on their heads. These are the sarcophagi of Karajía, and they were made by the Chachapoya, the people of the cloud forest, who flourished from around the 9th century AD until the Inca conquered them in the late 1400s. Each figure is not a statue, but a container. Inside the hollow clay body sits a single mummy, folded into a seated, fetal position. The Chachapoya built them from clay, sticks, grass, and stone, then placed them on a narrow ledge roughly 24 meters up the cliff face. That is about the height of an 8-story building. The placement was deliberate. Height kept the dead safe from grave robbers, from animals, and from flooding, and it let the ancestors watch over the valley below. The skulls perched on top are thought to be trophy heads or venerated ancestors, hints of a culture built around warfare and lineage. The Swiss-Peruvian scholar Federico Kaufmann Doig studied these cliff tombs closely and helped bring them to the world's attention. An earthquake in 1928 destroyed part of the original row of 8, leaving about 6 main figures today. And that fragility is exactly why you cannot reach them. Visitors are forbidden from climbing to the ledge. You can only view the figures from an opposite lookout, across the gap. The clay is unfired and held together with grass and plant fiber, so a single touch, or even strong vibration, could bring a figure down. The pigment has survived for 5 centuries, only because the overhang shields it from rain. Popular videos love to call these giants, but archaeologists are firm that they are ordinary human burials inside oversized shells. Similar cliff tombs survive nearby at Rivash and Los Pinchudos, part of the same tradition of burying the dead where the living could not easily follow. Here, the Chachapoya hid their dead by lifting them out of reach. At the next site, an entire tomb was hidden a different way. It was buried on purpose, twice. Number 3. The Xagħra Stone Circle. On the small Maltese island of Gozo, close to the towering Gontija temples, there is a ring of megalithic stones with a secret underneath it. Beneath the circle lies a natural cave system that Neolithic people turned into a vast tomb, in use from around 4100 BC to 2500 BC. It is called the Brocktorf Circle, after an artist who painted it in the 1820s, or simply the Xagħra Stone Circle. And its story is one of the strangest in archaeology, because it was discovered, dug up, and then deliberately hidden again. An antiquarian named John Otto Beyer explored parts of it in the 1820s. After that, the site was lost, buried under farmland, its exact location forgotten. It was rediscovered and properly excavated between 1987 and 1994 by a team led by Caroline Malone, Simon Stoddart, Anthony Bonanno, and David Trump. What they found was staggering. The remains of up to 800 people had been placed in the underground chambers over many centuries. The bones were jumbled and rearranged, evidence that the dead were moved and sorted long after burial. Among the finds were remarkable carved figures, including a pair of seated statuettes that rank among the finest art of the Maltese temple culture. And then, when the excavation was complete, the team did something that sounds backward. They filled the site back in and sealed it. This is called reburial, and it is a recognized way of protecting a fragile site. Covering it back over stabilizes the temperature and humidity and stops the delicate deposits from decaying in the open air. So today, you cannot visit the chambers. The circle is closed, its treasures moved to the Gozo Museum of Archaeology, its underground world resting under soil once more. Most archaeologists read the site as a communal tomb tied to the ritual life of the nearby temples, a place where the living and the dead met. The study of its bones told us about the diet, health, and population of Neolithic Malta. Fringe writers like to claim a lost advanced civilization built these places, but the evidence points to a sophisticated local farming society that rose and then collapsed around 2500 BC, for reasons still debated. To reopen the circle would risk destroying the very layers that make it valuable. Sometimes we hide our own excavations, and sometimes a room was sealed shut 1,000 years before any modern archaeologist arrived. Number 4. The Mogao Library Cave. In the deserts of western China, near the oasis town of Dunhuang, hundreds of caves are carved into a cliff. This is the Mogao Complex, a Buddhist wonderland of 492 decorated cave temples, filled with murals covering around 45,000 square meters, painted across 1,000 years. But the most important cave here is one of the smallest. It is a side chamber, only a few meters across, known simply as Cave 17, or the Library Cave. Around the early 1100s, someone bricked up its doorway and plastered over it, hiding it completely. It stayed hidden for roughly 900 years. Then, on the 25th of June, 1900, a Taoist caretaker named Wang Wanlu was clearing sand from the corridor when he found the sealed wall, and behind it a room packed floor to ceiling. Inside were about 50,000 manuscripts, paintings, and textiles, preserved perfectly by the dry desert air. That is like a small national archive crammed into a closet. The documents were written in Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, Sogdian, and many other languages, covering Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, and more. One of them was a copy of the Diamond Sutra dated to 868 AD the earliest dated printed book in the world, and then came the loss. In 1907, the British archaeologist Aurel Stein arrived and carried away thousands of these manuscripts for a small payment. The next year, the Frenchman Paul Pelliot handpicked thousands more of the finest texts. Others went to Russia and Japan. The treasure of the library cave was scattered across the museums of the world, and to this day it remains divided between the British Library, the French National Library, and collections far from home. Why was it sealed in the first place? One theory says it was a store for worn-out sacred texts, too holy to throw away. Another says it was hidden in a hurry to protect it from an approaching army. Most scholars now lean toward the sacred storeroom idea. Today the cave is essentially off-limits. The Dunhuang Academy opens only a rotating handful of caves at a time because the breath, heat, and moisture of visitors slowly destroy the murals. A full digital copy now lets people explore Dunhuang without setting foot inside. Here, the enemy was paper and breath. At the next site, the thing keeping people out was an army and a border. Number 5. Ani, the Forbidden Ghost City. On a wind-swept plateau in far eastern Turkey, right on the border with Armenia, stand the ruins of a city that once rivaled the greatest capitals on earth. This is Ani. In the year 961 A.D., it became the capital of the Bagratid Armenian kingdom, and at its height around the year 1000 it may have held 100,000 people, as large as Constantinople or Cairo in the same era. It was known as the city of 1001 churches. Its cathedral, finished in 1001 AD, was designed by the architect Turdat, the same man trusted to repair the Great Dome of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. But Ani's location, on the edge of empires, became its undoing. The Byzantines took it in 1045. The Seljuk Turks sacked it under Alp Arslan in 1064. An earthquake in 1319 and the collapse of the old trade routes finished the job, and slowly the city emptied until it was completely abandoned. Then came the strangest chapter. For much of the 20th century, Ani sat inside a militarized zone on the tense border between Turkey and the Soviet Union. To visit, you needed a special permit, and you were forbidden from taking photographs, because the ruins faced a closed and guarded international frontier, watched by soldiers and towers. An entire ancient city that you were not allowed to look at through a camera. Only in the early 2000s were the permit rules dropped, and access slowly opened. In 2016, Ani was finally recognized as a World Heritage Site. Even so, many of its monuments are collapsing, damaged by earthquakes, weather, neglect, and their long military limbo. Historians see Ani's fall as an ordinary tragedy of earthquakes, invasions, and shifting trade, not a curse, though online stories love to call it a city that vanished overnight. In truth, it faded slowly. Since the 2010s, conservation work has stabilized the cathedral and the Church of the Redeemer, which had been split in two by a lightning strike in 1955. Rare frescoes still cling to the walls of the Church of Tigran Honens. Ani shows us a different kind of forbidden. Not fragile, not sacred, but sealed off by politics and the barbed edge of a frontier. At the next site, the barrier is the most delicate thing imaginable. It is human breath. Number 6. The Painted Tombs of Tarquinia. North of Rome lies the town of Tarquinia, once one of the great cities of the Etruscans, the people who ruled central Italy before Rome swallowed them up. Beneath the fields around the town is the Monterozzi necropolis, a city of the dead holding around 6,000 rock-cut tombs. About 200 of them are painted, the largest collection of Etruscan wall painting in the world. The best of them date from the 6th and 5th centuries BC, and they are astonishing. On the walls, painted more than 2,500 years ago, people dance and feast and play music. Dolphins leap across the tomb of hunting and fishing. Spotted cats prowl the tomb of the leopards. These paintings give us our clearest window into how the Etruscans lived and how they imagined the afterlife as a joyful banquet that never ends. But the tombs are almost never open. Most are sealed and climate-controlled, and the few you can see are usually viewed through glass doors. The reason is heartbreakingly simple. The paintings are true frescoes, laid on a thin skin of plaster over soft volcanic rock. They are so fragile that the breath, body heat, and moisture of visitors are enough to feed mold, draw out salts, and fade the colors. In these tombs, you are the threat. Conservators learned this lesson the hard way at places like Lascaux, where a painted cave was ruined by the crowds who came to admire it. So, at Tarquinia, sensors now watch the temperature, humidity, and the growth of microbes, and tombs are opened only briefly for study. Some tombs, discovered with their paintings still bright, faded within a few years of being exposed. That is why the doors stay shut. Scholars read the frescoes as a celebration of a lively aristocratic afterlife, painted in a style that borrowed from Greek art arriving through trade, then made distinctly Etruscan. Older theories that the Etruscans came from some mysterious eastern homeland have faded too, as genetic studies point to a largely local Italian ancestry. Because the tombs were reused and looted over the centuries, the paintings are often the only evidence left of the people buried there. Detached frescoes now hang in the town's archaeological museum, rescued from walls too damaged to save in place. Here, fragility keeps the door closed. At the next site, it is sheer scale and a river of ancient mud. Number 7. The Tomb of the Sons of Ramesses II. Back in the Valley of the Kings sits a tomb that was almost thrown away. It is called Xagħra, and for a long time everyone assumed it was small and empty. An explorer named James Burton crawled into it in 1825, found it choked with hardened flood debris, and dismissed it. For over a century it was ignored, its entrance lost under rubble and a tourist car park. Then, starting in 1987, the American Egyptologist Kent Weeks and his Theban mapping project began clearing it out. In 1995, they made a discovery that rewrote the map of the valley. KV5 was not small. It was the largest tomb ever found in Egypt. So far, more than 130 chambers and corridors have been identified, and there may be more. A great pillared hall opens onto passages, lined with dozens of side rooms, arranged around a statue of the god Osiris. This was a family tomb, built to hold the many sons of Ramesses II, a pharaoh who ruled for around 66 years and is thought to have fathered about 50 sons. The names of several princes still appear on its walls, but you cannot visit it. For 3,000 years, flash floods poured into the valley and washed limestone debris into the tomb, where it set as hard as concrete. Removing that fill is painstaking work, and the rock itself is treacherous. Much of it is a weak shale that swells and crumbles when it gets wet, threatening to bring the ceilings down. So KV5 remains an active, unfinished excavation, closed to the public, a dig that could take many more years. Sensational stories promise hidden treasure inside, but the excavators are clear. The tomb was thoroughly robbed in antiquity, and what remains are fragments, bones, and broken funerary goods, not gold. Its real value is the plan itself, a subterranean palace where every other royal tomb has just a few rooms. KV5 forced Egyptologists to admit how much of the Valley of the Kings may still be unexplored. Flooding remains a constant danger, and drainage work is now part of protecting the site. Here, fragility and flood keep the door shut. At the next site, nothing is broken. Nothing is flooded. The door is closed by sacred law alone. Number 8. The Inner Sanctum of Ise. In the forests of Mie Prefecture in Japan stands the holiest site in the Shinto religion, the Ise Grand Shrine. It is dedicated above all to Amaterasu, the sun goddess, and it enshrines the sacred mirror, one of the 3 great treasures of the imperial house. The complex has 2 main shrines and around 125 smaller ones. and at its heart is a place that almost no living person is allowed to see. The innermost sanctuary is surrounded by 4 rows of wooden fences. Only the high priest or high priestess and members of the imperial family may pass within. Ordinary worshippers can walk only as far as the outer gate, where the sanctuary is hidden behind curtains and fences. You are forbidden from photographing it. But the strangest thing about Ise is not the secrecy. It is that this ancient shrine is never actually old. Every 20 years, the entire shrine is torn down and rebuilt from scratch on an adjacent plot, in a ritual called the Shikinen Sengu. The most recent rebuilding was completed in 2013, the 62nd in the series, and the next is due around 2033. Each rebuilding uses about 10,000 cypress trees, joined without a single nail in an architectural style over 1,000 years old. The old timbers are dismantled and reused at other shrines. Through this cycle, the exact carpentry skills are passed from one generation to the next, kept alive by constant practice rather than frozen in a museum. This captures a very different idea of what a monument is. In the West, we treasure the original stone. At Ise, the value lies in eternal renewal and ritual purity, an idea called tokowaka. The shrine has stood in spirit for well over 1,000 years, yet the wood is never more than 20 years old. The sacred mirror inside is never shown, and its true appearance is unknown even to the priests who guard it. People love to speculate about what is really inside, but the barrier here is not concealment of some secret object. It is a religious taboo, older and stronger than any archaeology. A managed sacred forest is even grown nearby to supply the timber for future rebuildings. Here the door is closed by faith. At the next site, it is closed by 3 faiths at once, and by a modern conflict. Number 9. The Sealed Cave of Machpelah. In the city of Hebron stands a massive stone building that is sacred to 3 religions at the same time. It is the Cave of Machpelah, known also as the Tomb of the Patriarchs, and in Islam as the Ibrahimi Mosque. Tradition holds that beneath it lie the biblical patriarchs and matriarchs, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. The great rectangular enclosure above the cave was built by Herod the Great in the 1st century BC from huge dressed limestone blocks in the same style as the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Its walls still stand around 12 meters high, among the best preserved buildings of the Herodian age. But the monument you can see is only a lid. The actual burial cave lies beneath the floor, and it is sealed. Access to those underground chambers has been forbidden for centuries. For long periods, non-Muslims were barred from climbing beyond a certain step, and the rules shifted with whoever held power. Almost no one has ever been down there. What glimpses we have are extraordinary. In 1119 AD, Crusaders reportedly found bones they believed belonged to the patriarchs. And in 1968, a young Israeli woman named Michal Arbel was lowered on a rope through a narrow shaft in the floor on the initiative of the General Moshe Dayan to photograph the chambers below. She reported steps and an inner cave, but no full excavation was ever allowed. That is the crucial point. No proper archaeological dig of the cave has ever been carried out. So the famous burials remain completely unverified by science. The Herodian building is securely dated, but who or what lies in the cave is a matter of tradition, not proven fact. The reason is obvious. A site this sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims cannot simply be excavated. And Hebron is a flashpoint of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, its access divided and tense, the scene of a deadly attack in 1994. The tombs that visitors see above ground are empty markers, called cenotaphs. The real graves, whatever they hold, rest sealed below. Here the door is closed by religion, and by politics together. At the last site, the door is closed by something quieter, and in a way more surprising. A deliberate decision, simply not to dig. Number 10. The Sealed Third of Pompeii. Everyone knows Pompeii. In the year 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried the Roman city under 4 to 6 meters of pumice and ash, freezing a single day in time. Buildings, frescoes, loaves of bread, and the shapes of the dying were all preserved. The city was rediscovered in 1748, and ever since it has been slowly uncovered. But here is the fact most visitors never learn. Roughly a third of Pompeii is still buried, and it is buried on purpose. This is not an accident of funding or time. It is a deliberate policy. Archaeologists have chosen to leave a large part of the city untouched, sealed under the ash, as a reserve for the future. The reason cuts to the heart of the whole subject. Excavation is destruction. The moment you uncover an ancient wall painting, you expose it to sunlight, rain, pollution, and the wear of millions of tourists, and it begins to die. Pompeii learned this the hard way. In the 18 and 1900s, whole districts were dug up quickly and then left to rot for lack of money to maintain them. So around 2012, a huge European-funded program, the Great Pompeii Project, shifted the priority away from digging and towards saving what was already exposed. When new excavations do happen, as in a district called Regio 5 from 2018 onward, they are careful and limited, and they still produce wonders. A fresco of Leda and the Swan, a snack bar, a ceremonial chariot. But the guiding rule holds. Preserving the city we already have matters more than uncovering new ground. Leaving that third buried is a gift to the future. A bet that archaeologists a century from now will have gentler tools and will learn far more from the same soil than we could today. Under that blanket of ash lie streets, houses, and almost certainly more bodies. So far, around 1,150 victims have been found, and more surely wait in the sealed zone. We even know the eruption through the eyes of a witness, Pliny the Younger, who described it in his letters and recorded the death of his uncle. Rumors whisper that discoveries are being hidden. The truth is far calmer and stranger. The restraint is openly stated, printed in policy, backed by international heritage law. And if the rule is, do not dig, it forces a real question. What exactly are we protecting, and from whom? Line these 10 places up, and a pattern appears. Not one of them is truly sealed by a curse. Every barrier is a human decision, made for a stated reason. Some are closed by physical danger, like the unstable tunnel under Seti I and the flood-choked halls of Xagħra 5. Some are closed by fragility, like the unfired clay of Karajía, the frescoes of Tarquinia, and the delicate deposits of the Xagħra circle. Some are closed by geography and politics, like the militarized border around Ani and the divided city of Hebron. Some are closed by sacred law, like the Inner Sanctum of Ise and the cave of Machpelah. And some are closed by pure policy, like the buried third of Pompeii and the capped visits at Dunhuang. The common thread is the opposite of a curse. In almost every case, off-limits does not mean the place is dangerous to us. It means we are dangerous to the place. Our breath, our heat, our humidity, and the carbon dioxide we exhale measurably degrade ancient art. The painted cave of Lascaux, closed to the public in 1963, is the great warning, ruined by the crowds who loved it. Reburial, the strange act of covering a site back over, is not a failure, but a tool, a way of restoring the stable conditions that kept a site alive for millennia. The romance of the curse survives because a locked door invites the imagination. But real prohibitions are documented, argued over, and reversible in principle. And once you see that the true adversary is loss, one enemy stands above the rest. It is time, and it never stops. To understand why opening a sealed space is so destructive, think about what a sealed space actually is. Over centuries, a closed tomb or chamber reaches equilibrium. The temperature settles, the humidity settles, and the mix of gases settles into a stable balance. Everything inside has made its peace with those exact conditions. Then you open the door, and that balance shatters. Fresh air rushes in. Moisture condenses. Salts dissolved in the stone begin to move and crystallize, pushing paint off the walls from behind. Fungus and bacteria, fed by the carbon dioxide of visitors, bloom across surfaces that were sterile for 1,000 years. This is why the manuscripts of Dunhuang survived. The desert air stayed dry and still. It is why the pigment at Karajía endures under its dry overhang, and why the frescoes of Tarquinia rot the moment humid crowds arrive. The history of archaeology is really a slow learning curve away from this damage. Early excavators dug fast and lost enormous amounts of information. In the 1860s, Giuseppe Fiorelli at Pompeii took an early step in the other direction, pouring plaster into the voids left by decomposed bodies to record their shapes before they were lost. Modern archaeology goes much further. Ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, and even cosmic ray imaging now let researchers look inside sealed spaces without breaking them open. That same cosmic ray method revealed a large hidden void inside the Great Pyramid without cutting a single new tunnel. Digital twins can capture an entire site in detail before anyone touches it. So the goal itself has changed. Where explorers once wanted to discover, conservators now want to preserve information for a future that will read it better. Every dig is, in part, a controlled act of destruction. And that raises a simple question about who gets to make that choice. Behind every forbidden sign stands a stack of laws, budgets, and institutions. In Egypt, the Supreme Council of Antiquities controls tombs like KV-17 and KV-5. Across borders, World Heritage status from UNESCO adds a layer of international obligation over sites like Ani, Pompeii, and Tarquinia. Individual academies set their own rules. The Dunhuang Academy decides how many people may enter its caves each day and which ones stay shut. Religious authorities govern the sacred sites. The shrine administration at Ise enforces rules rooted in imperial and Shinto tradition, and access to Machpelah is controlled by a tense mix of religious and political power. Over the last century, the profession itself has written these instincts into formal codes, from the Venice Charter of 1964 onward, which enshrined the principle of minimal intervention. Funding shapes everything, too. The Great Pompeii project used a flood of European money to shift a whole site from digging to maintenance. Museums far from the original sites hold displaced treasures. From the Dunhuang manuscripts in London and Paris to Seti I's alabaster sarcophagus in a London museum, and debates over returning them tie access to cultural politics. Anti-looting laws drive the viewing ban at Karajía. Military authorities once controlled Ani. What the public almost never sees is the internal risk assessment behind a closure. The quiet weighing of national pride, tourist revenue, scholarship, and irreversible loss. No single villain hides these places. Institutions do, for reasons they can usually explain. The trouble is that transparency varies, and secrecy, even honest secrecy, is what feeds suspicion, which leaves the hardest case of all, the places that no one is funding to protect. Here is the uncomfortable truth about forbidding entry. A closed door does not stop decay. Many of these sites are crumbling behind their locks. The churches of Ani collapse from earthquakes and weather, no matter who is allowed to photograph them. KV-5 floods again and again as storms grow fiercer. Climate change is raising humidity and driving heavier rainfall across the Mediterranean and the deserts, and rising groundwater is attacking Egyptian tombs from below, drawing destructive salt up through the stone. Looting still strips sites where enforcement is thin, as it did for generations across the Chachapoya cliff tombs. War and unrest threaten heritage in unstable regions. Tourism keeps growing, even as the money and staff to manage it fall behind. The lesson Pompeii learned twice is that excavated ground left without care simply rots. So conservation is not a way of stopping loss. It is the management of decline. Some prohibitions genuinely buy time. Others only postpone an ending that is already written. This is why the digital record matters so much. The scans and models racing to capture these places before they are gone, because the copy we make now may outlast the stone. The forbidden third of Pompeii is, in the end, a wager. It bets that the future will be richer, wiser, and gentler than we are, and able to do what we cannot. Whether that bet pays off depends on money, on climate, and on human will, none of them guaranteed. Which brings us back to the strangest idea in all of this. What does it really mean to leave a door shut on purpose? Across 10 sites and 4 continents, one lesson repeats. Some doors are kept shut not out of fear, but out of respect. Restraint has become a modern archaeological virtue, a deliberate reversal of centuries of plunder. Belzoni's generation took whatever it could carry. Ours, increasingly, chooses to leave things where they lie. The unopened door is a message written to the future. This is yours to study when your hands are steadier than ours. It is remarkable that a sacred taboo at Ise and a cold conservation policy at Pompeii arrive at exactly the same act. Do not enter. What we are guarding is not gold. It is information, context, and the fragile chain of evidence that turns a ruin into a story we can actually read. Because every generation's tools grow sharper, patience itself gains value with time. Seen that way, the forbidden ruin is not a mystery being withheld from you. It is a promise being kept. To stand outside a sealed door is to trust that knowing everything right now was never the point. And sometimes the most respectful thing we can do with the past is simply to let it wait.